The chains burned against her scales like frozen fire, and Kyrvith kept her golden eyes fixed on the metal floor beneath her knees, as the auction house filled with the worst creatures the galaxy had to offer. She was Drakari, the last of her kind, and once upon a time, her very shadow would have sent these pathetic beings running for their lives, but that was before the hunters came. That was before her world burned. That was before they killed everyone she had ever loved and wrapped her wings in neutron wire so tight that she could feel her bones cracking with every breath. The auction platform of Nexus 7 was a massive circular stage, floating in the center of a domed chamber, and holographic displays projected her image to thousands of bidders seated in rising tiers all around her. She could hear them whispering in dozens of alien languages, their translators buzzing with excitement and greed. "A genuine Drakari," the auctioneer announced, his forearms spreading wide as his slug-like body oozed across the platform. "The last of her species, captured after the fall of Pyraxian Prime. Certified authentic by the Galactic Biological Registry." The crowd murmured with hunger. Kiev had once commanded fleets of warrior priests who could tear starships apart with their bare claws. And now she was being sold like livestock to creatures who would have trembled at her feet in the old days. A Vorthakian warlord in the front row leaned forward, his tusked face splitting into a cruel smile as he examined her bound form. And she knew exactly what he was imagining, her body broken and bleeding in his fighting pits, forced to battle other slaves for the entertainment of his guests until death finally claimed her 500,000 credits, the Vorthakian called out. And the crowd gasped at the opening bid. 600,000, countered a thin insectoid creature from the shadows, its compound eyes glittering with dark intentions. 1 million, the Vorthakian growled. Refusing to be outdone, the bidding war erupted like wildfire, and Kyrvith closed her eyes as the numbers climbed higher and higher, each credit representing another chain around her soul. 2 million, 2.5 million from the Vorthakian, who slammed his fist against his armrest and dared anyone to challenge him. The auction house fell silent, and the auctioneer's translator crackled with glee as he prepared to close the sale. 3 million credits going once, he announced. 3 million credits going twice. 50,000 credits. The voice was quiet but steady, and it cut through the silence like a blade through silk. Every head in the auction house turned toward the speaker, and Kyrvith opened her eyes to see the most unremarkable creature she had ever witnessed standing at the edge of the platform. He was human. She had heard of humans before, soft, fragile beings from a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy, known for their stubbornness and their strange tendency to form emotional attachments to everything around them. This particular human was middle-aged with gray streaking through his dark hair, and his face was weathered with lines that spoke of hard work and harder losses. His clothes were stained with engine oil, and his hands were rough with calluses, and he looked like he had not slept properly in months. The Vorthakian burst into laughter that shook the walls, and soon the entire auction house was roaring with amusement at this pathetic creature who dared to challenge a warlord's bid with pocket change. "Is this a joke?" The auctioneer sputtered, his slug body quivering with confusion. "Human, you cannot possibly." "I invoke the Covenant of Mercy," the human said. Calmly, the laughter died instantly. Kyrvith felt something stir in her chest, something she had not felt in 3 years of captivity, because even she knew what those words meant. The Covenant of Mercy was older than the Galactic Federation itself, a law written in the earliest days of interstellar civilization, when the first species realized that cruelty would destroy them all. It stated that any being could claim a slave for fair labor if they could prove genuine need and swear an oath of protection. No one had invoked it in centuries. "You cannot be serious," the Vorthakian snarled. rising from his seat with murder in his eyes. "I will not lose my prize to some human mechanic playing with ancient laws." "The covenant is still binding," the human replied without flinching. "Check your legal archives if you need to. But I have the right to make my claim." The auctioneer fumbled with his datapad, his four hands trembling as he scrolled through page after page of galactic law. And his face grew paler with each passing second. "He is correct," the auctioneer finally admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "The Covenant of Mercy remains active under Federation Statute 774 Alpha. But," he turned to the human with desperate eyes, "you must prove genuine need, human. And what possible need could someone like you have for a Drakari warrior?" The human reached into his pocket and pulled out a small holographic projector, and with a soft click, an image flickered to life above his palm and showed a little girl. She could not have been older than 8 years old, with pale skin stretched thin over fragile bones and dark circles under her hollow eyes. Medical readouts floated beside her image charts and graphs that Kairvith did not fully understand, but which clearly painted a picture of a body failing piece by piece. "Her name is Lily," the human said, and his voice cracked just slightly on the name. "She is my daughter, and she has Kepler syndrome." Murmur rippled through the crowd. Even the Vorthakians seemed to pause, because everyone knew what Kepler syndrome meant. It was a death sentence written in slow motion, a degenerative neural condition that would steal everything from its victim one piece at a time until nothing remained. "The medicine she needs is expensive," the human continued, "which means I have to take salvage jobs in dangerous space to pay for it. And that means leaving her alone on my ship for days at a time." He looked up at Kairvith, and their eyes met for the first time. And she saw something in his gaze that she had not expected. Not greed, not cruelty, not the hunger that filled every other face in this room. She saw desperation. She saw love. She saw a father who would do anything to protect his child. "I need someone to keep her safe when I cannot," he said. "Someone strong enough to fight off pirates and raiders and anyone else who might threaten her. And I am asking, not demanding, asking for the chance to make that happen. This is absurd." The Vorthakian roared, finally finding his voice again. "You expect us to hand over a priceless Drakari warrior because of some sick human child?" "I expect the law to be honored," the human replied. And there was steel beneath the exhaustion in his voice. "The same law that protects your trade routes and your treaties and your precious credits." The auction house erupted into chaos as warlords and crime lords shouted objections and legal experts scrambled to find loopholes. But Kairvith was no longer listening. She was staring at the holographic image of the little girl, Lily, whose hollow eyes seemed to look back at her with a mixture of fear and hope, and she was remembering the younglings of her own world, the little ones she had failed to protect when the hunters came. The flames that had consumed everything she loved while she screamed in chains. The auctioneer raised all four hands for silence. And slowly, reluctantly, the crowd obeyed. "The Covenant of Mercy is clear," he announced, each word seeming to cause him physical pain. "The human's claim is valid under galactic law, and the Drakari will be released into his custody pending formal registration." The Vorthakian looked like he wanted to tear the human apart with his bare hands. But even he knew better than to violate ancient law in front of thousands of witnesses. "This is not over," he growled at the human. "I will find you, mechanic, and I will take what is mine." The human did not respond. He simply walked toward the platform with a pair of bolt cutters in his hand and began working on the chains that bound Kairvith's wrists. "My name is Marcus Chun," he said quietly, "and I am sorry for what they did to you." Kairvith stared at him in confusion, because no one had apologized to her in 3 years. No one had treated her like a person instead of a prize. "Why?" she finally asked. Her voice, rough from disuse. Marcus paused and looked up at her with tired eyes. Because my daughter believes in dragons, he said. And right now, she needs something to believe in. He finished cutting the chains and stepped back. And for the first time in 3 years, Kyrvith felt the weight lift from her wrists she was still bound by. Neutron wire around her wings still weakened and suppressed and far from the warrior she had once been, but something had changed. Something small and fragile and human had planted itself in her chest, and she did not know what to do with it. The ship was called the Wandering Sparrow, and it was the ugliest vessel Kyrvith had ever seen. It looked like someone had taken 3 different ships and welded them together with more hope than skill. And every surface was covered in scratches and dents and repair patches that told the story of 1,000 close calls. The engines wheezed and groaned as they limped through hyperspace, and strange rattling sounds came from somewhere deep in the walls. And Kyrvith found herself wondering how this floating pile of scrap metal had not fallen apart years ago. I know she does not look like much, Marcus said as he led her through the cramped corridors. But she has gotten us through some tough times. Kyrvith did not respond. She was too busy cataloging all the ways she could kill this human and escape even. With her fire glands chemically suppressed and her wings bound with neutron wire, she was still Drakari. And her claws were still sharp enough to tear through flesh and bone. She could kill him right now and take control of the ship before he even realized what was happening, but something held her back. Maybe it was the way he walked, shoulders heavy with exhaustion, but still moving forward one step at a time. Maybe it was the holographic image of the little girl that kept flashing through her mind, or maybe she was just too tired to fight anymore. The living quarters are through here, Marcus said, stopping in front of a reinforced door with childish drawings taped all over its surface. And this is Lily's room. He pressed his palm against the access panel, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. And the first thing Kyrvith noticed was the warmth, not physical warmth. The ship's heating system was clearly failing, and the room was actually quite cold, but something else, something that felt like home. Walls were covered in hand-drawn pictures of dragons and stars and distant planets, each one rendered in bright colors with the unsteady hand of a child who had never let her imagination be limited by reality. A small bed sat in the corner, surrounded by monitors and medical equipment that beeped and hummed with quiet urgency. And in the center of all those machines lay the smallest human Kyrvith had ever seen. Lily Chun looked even more fragile in person than she had in the hologram, with skin so pale it was almost translucent and bones that seemed ready to break at the slightest touch. But her eyes were alive with curiosity as she stared at the towering dragon woman who had just entered her room. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice thin and reedy but filled with wonder. "Is that really her?" Marcus knelt beside her bed and took her tiny hand in his calloused palm. "Yes, sweetheart," he said softly. "This is Kyrvith, and she is a real Drakari, just like in your stories." Lily's eyes grew even wider, and she tried to sit up before a coughing fit forced her back against her pillows. "Easy," Marcus murmured, adjusting her breathing mask. "Remember what the doctor said about getting too excited." But Lily was not listening. She was staring at Kyrvith with an expression that made the ancient warrior deeply uncomfortable. "Are you going to eat me?" Lily asked. The question was so absurd that Kyrvith almost laughed. And she had not laughed in 3 years. "I have devoured warriors who conquered entire star systems," she replied flatly. "And I have burned worlds that threaten my people." Lily considered this for a moment. "That is so cool," she said, and her pale face split into the brightest smile Kyrvith had ever seen. "Can you tell me about it?" Something cracked inside Kyrvith's chest, something old and brittle and long forgotten, and she found herself standing there in silence, staring at this tiny human child who looked at a monster and saw a hero. Marcus gently touched his daughter's forehead and stood up. Lily needs to rest now, he said. But perhaps Kyrvith can come back later and tell you some stories. If she wants to. He looked at Kyrvith with those tired eyes, and she saw no command in them. No expectation, only hope. They left Lily's room and walked in silence through the winding corridors until they reached a small cargo bay that had been converted into a workshop. Tools hung from every wall, and engine parts covered every surface, and the smell of oil and metal filled the air like a familiar perfume. Marcus sat down on a battered crate and rubbed his eyes with weary hands. I suppose you want to know what I expect from you, he said. Kyrvith crossed her arms over her bound chest and fixed him with a cold stare. I am Drakari, she replied. We do not serve, I know. My people ruled 12 star systems before your species learned to walk upright. I know. I could kill you right now and take the ship for myself. Marcus looked up at her, and there was no fear in his eyes, only a deep and profound sadness. I know that too, he said. But I am going to ask you to listen anyway. He reached behind him and pulled out a small device. And with a soft click, the neutron wire around Kyrvith's wings loosened and fell away. She stared at him in shock, her wings slowly unfurling for the first time in months, the muscles screaming with pain and relief as they stretched toward the ceiling. What are you doing? She demanded. I'm not asking you to serve me, Marcus said. And I am not asking you to be a slave or a weapon or a trophy. He stood up and walked toward a grimy viewport, staring out at the stars that streaked past in rivers of light. Lily's mother died 2 years ago, he continued, his voice heavy with grief. A transport accident on the way to see her sister, just wrong place, wrong time. He turned to face Kyrvith, and she saw the tears he was fighting to hold back. Lily was already sick by then, and losing her mother almost broke her. But she held on because she had me. And I held on because I had her. He gestured around the cramped workshop. I take salvage jobs in the outer systems because that is where the money is. But it is also where the pirates are, and every time I leave, I wonder if I'm going to come back to an empty ship and a daughter who died alone. His voice cracked, and he took a moment to compose himself. I need someone to protect her when I'm gone. Someone strong enough to fight off anything that threatens her, and wise enough to know when fighting is not the answer. And you think I am that someone? Kyrvith asked, her voice harder than she intended. Marcus shook his head. I do not know what you are, he admitted. But I know what you could be. If you choose. He walked toward the cargo bay door and paused at the threshold. The door is open, he said. And there is an escape pod in Section 7 that is fully fueled and ready to go. And I will not stop you if you decide to leave. Kyrvith stared at him in disbelief. You would just let me go? You were never mine to keep, Marcus replied. But my daughter believes in dragons, and right now, she needs something to believe in, something bigger than this broken ship and her broken body and her broken father. He stepped through the door and looked back one final time. I am not asking you to serve, he said. I am asking you to choose. Then he was gone, and Kyrvith was alone with her thoughts and her freedom and a choice. She did not know how to make. She stood there for a long time, her wings spreading and folding as she tested muscles she had not used in months, her mind racing through all the reasons she should leave. She owed these humans nothing. She had no obligation to stay. She could find a ship, rebuild her strength, hunt down the ones who had destroyed her world, and make them pay for every life they had taken. But every time she tried to picture herself leaving, she saw Lily's face instead, that bright smile and those hollow eyes and that tiny voice asking if she was going to eat her. And she remembered the younglings of her own world, the ones she had failed to save, the ones whose faces still haunted her dreams. Maybe this was her punishment. Maybe this was her redemption. Or maybe Just maybe this was something else. Entirely Leacriff walked back through the corridors until she reached Lily's room, and she stood outside the door for a long moment, listening to the soft beeping of the medical monitors. Then, she pressed her palm against the access panel and stepped inside. Lily was still awake, her hollow eyes fixed on the dragon pictures that covered her walls. And she looked up when Kyrvith entered. "You came back," she whispered. "I came back." Kyrvith agreed. She walked to the edge of the bed and sat down on the cold metal floor, folding her wings around herself like a blanket. "Now," she said, "do you want to hear about the time I fought the Void Serpent of Nexus Prime?" Lily's smile could have lit up a galaxy, and somewhere deep inside her chest, Kyrvith felt something begin to heal. 3 months passed aboard the Wandering Sparrow, and Kyrvith discovered something she had never expected to find in the cold emptiness of space. She discovered family. It happened slowly, like frost melting in the first warmth of spring. And she did not even realize it was happening until it was already done at first. She told herself she was simply honoring her word. She had agreed to stay, and Drakari did not break their promises. But the truth was more complicated than that. The truth was that Lily-chan had somehow crept past every wall she had built around her heart and made a home there. Every morning, Kyrvith would enter Lily's room and find the little girl waiting for her with eager eyes and 1,000 questions. "Tell me about the sky dances," Lily would say. Or, "What did the Crystal Mountains look like?" Or, "Did you really have a pet firehawk when you were little?" And Kyrvith would sit beside her bed and weave stories of the world she had lost, the world of Pyraxian Prime, where rivers of liquid flame carved through valleys of shimmering glass, and the air itself sang with the heat of 1,000 suns. She told Lily about the warrior priests who had trained her from birth, about the sacred vows she had taken when she came of age, about the great battles she had fought against the enemies of her people, and Lily listened to every word with the kind of wonder that only a child could possess in return. Lily taught Kyrvith about human things. She taught her how to fold paper into the shapes of birds and flowers, a strange art called origami that required patience and precision instead of fire and fury. She taught her the names of human constellations, the Great Bear and the Hunting Dog, and something called Orion, who was apparently some kind of legendary warrior. She even taught her how to laugh at terrible jokes, the kind that made no logical sense, but somehow forced a strange sound from Kyrvith's throat anyway. "Why did the star go to school?" Lily asked one evening, her pale face glowing in the soft light of her medical monitor. Kyrvith considered the question seriously. "Stars do not attend educational institutions," she replied. Lily giggled so hard she started coughing, and Kyrvith had to help her with her breathing mask while trying to understand what was funny about her perfectly logical answer, because it wanted to be brighter. Lily finally managed to say between coughs. Kyrvith stared at her in confusion. "That makes no sense." "I know." Lily grinned. "That is why it is funny." The Drakari warrior did not understand human humor, but she understood that Lily's laughter was the most precious sound in the universe, and she would do anything to hear it again. As the weeks passed, the chemical suppressants in Kyrvith's system began to fade, and her natural abilities slowly returned. Her fire glands reawakened first, not with the explosive force of her warrior days, but with a gentle warmth that spread through her chest like a second heartbeat. She discovered this new power late one night when the ship's heating system failed again, and Lily started shivering in her sleep. Without thinking, Kyrvith placed her hand on the wall beside Lily's bed and pushed warmth through her palm, heating the metal until the room filled with gentle comfort. Lily stopped shivering and smiled in her sleep, and Kyrvith sat there until dawn, keeping the wall warm with nothing but her own fire. Marcus found her there in the morning, and he did not say anything. He just brought her a cup of something hot and bitter that humans call coffee and sat beside her in silence. They had developed their own kind of communication over the months. She and Marcus, not words so much as gestures and glances and the occasional grunt of acknowledgement he would leave for salvage missions, sometimes for days at a time, and she would guard his daughter with every fiber of her being. He would return with medicine and supplies and fuel for the ship, and he would always find Lily laughing at some story Carveth had told her or trying to teach the Drakari some new human custom once. He came back to find Carveth carefully using her flame to forge a small metal figurine while Lily watched with fascination. It was a dragon. Of course, a Drakari in full flight, wings spread wide and flames trailing from its jaws. For when your eyes get tired, Carveth had explained to Lily. So you can feel the dragon even when you cannot see her. Marcus had turned away to hide his tears, and Carveth had pretended not to notice Lily's condition continued to worsen despite all their efforts. And some days were harder than others. Some days, Lily could not get out of bed at all, and Carveth would lie on the floor beside her and describe the sunset over the crystal mountains in such vivid detail that Lily swore she could feel the warmth on her skin some days. Lily's vision would blur so badly that she could not see the pictures on her walls, and Carveth would guide her small hands over the metal figurines she had forged, letting her feel the shapes of dragons and stars and far-off worlds. And some days, Lily would cry from the pain and the fear and the unfairness of it all, and Carveth would wrap her wings around the tiny human and hold her until the tears stopped. "Are you scared of dying?" Lily asked one night, her voice barely a whisper in the darkness. Carveth the question carefully. "No," she finally replied. "Death is just another journey, and I have made many journeys in my life. Were you scared when your world died?" The question struck like a blade, and Carveth was silent for a long moment. "Yes," she admitted. "I was scared, and I was angry, and I was sadder than I had ever been in my entire life." Lily's small hand found hers in the darkness. "I am sorry they hurt you," she said. Carveth felt something wet slide down her scaled cheek, and she realized with shock that she was crying something she had not done. "Since the fall of Pyraxian Prime, I am sorry they are hurting you too," she replied. They held hands in the darkness until Lily fell asleep, and Carveth stayed there all night, guarding her dreams like the sacred treasure they were. 2 days later, the Vorthakian slavers found them. Carveth was in the engine room, helping Marcus repair a leaking fuel line. When the proximity alarms started screaming, they rushed to the cockpit and found 3 massive warships dropping out of hyperspace, their weapons already charging with deadly light. "No," Marcus breathed, his face going pale. The communication screen flickered to life, and the tusked face of the Vorthakian warlord from the auction filled the display. "Did you really think you could run forever, human?" The warlord growled, his eyes burning with 3 months of humiliation and rage. "I told you, this was not over now. Surrender the Drakari, or I will destroy your pathetic ship with everyone aboard." Marcus did not hesitate. He grabbed a plasma rifle from the weapons locker and headed for the airlock. "What are you doing?" Carveth demanded, following him. "Buying you time," he replied, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Take Lily to the escape pod and run. I will hold them off as long as I can." "That is suicide." "Probably," he agreed, chambering around with practiced ease. "But she will live, and that is all that matters." Carveth stared at this fragile human, this soft, breakable creature with no claws or scales or fire, preparing to die for a child who was not even hers, and something inside her finally clicked into place. "Humans have a strange saying," she said, stepping in front of the airlock. "I heard Marcus tell it to Lily once. He said that love is not a cage, but a key." She placed her hand on his chest and pushed him gently back. I did not understand what it meant until now. Before Marcus could respond, Kyrvith opened the airlock and stepped into the void, and for the first time in 3 years, she felt truly free. The story spread across the galaxy like wildfire. It started in the taverns and trading posts of the outer systems, whispered between pilots and merchants who had heard it from someone who had heard it from someone else. Drakari, the last of the legendary dragon warriors, had destroyed 3 Vorthakian warships single-handedly, and she had done it not for territory or treasure or revenge, but for a dying human child and her mechanic father. At first, no one believed it. The Drakari were extinct. Everyone knew that, hunted to oblivion by the same warlords who now ruled the outer systems with iron fists, and even if one had survived, why would such a powerful being pledge herself to a pair of insignificant humans? But then the survivors of the Vorthakian fleet started talking, and the warlord himself confirmed the story with his silence, and suddenly the impossible became undeniable. A dragon had chosen to protect humans, and that changed everything. Representatives from a dozen species began seeking out the wandering sparrow, offering Marcus Chen legitimate contracts and fair wages for his salvage work. A medical research consortium on the other side of the galaxy heard about Lily's condition and offered to provide experimental treatment free of charge, not as charity. They insisted, but as an investment in a story they believed the universe needed to hear. Even the Galactic Federation took notice, sending official observers to verify the invocation of the Covenant of Mercy and ensure that all parties were being treated fairly. Kav did not understand all the attention. She had simply done what any Drakari would do. She had protected her Kethaler, her chosen flame, and she had destroyed those who threatened what she loved. But Marcus tried to explain it to her one night as they sat in the cockpit, watching stars drift past the viewport while Lily slept peacefully in her room. Humans are not very impressive by galactic standards, he said, his voice thoughtful. We cannot read minds or shoot fire or survive in vacuum. We are soft and fragile, and we do not live very long. He took a sip of his coffee and stared out at the endless dark. Most species in the galaxy look at us and see prey, or, at best, a labor force to be exploited. Kyrith considered this. Your species has achieved much despite these limitations, she pointed out. Your colonies span dozens of star systems, and your technology is not inferior to that of older races. True, Marcus agreed, but we have never been respected. We have been tolerated at best and conquered at worst. He turned to look at her, and there was something in his eyes she had never seen before. But you changed that. Kyrith did not understand. How? Because you, one of the most legendary warriors the galaxy has ever known, chose us. Marcus said, not because we conquered you, or paid you, or threatened you, but because a dying little girl believed in dragons and her tired old father asked for help. He smiled, and it transformed his weathered face into something almost young. You showed the galaxy that humans are worth protecting, that there is something in us worth caring about, and that is more valuable than any treasure in the universe. Kyrvith sat with those words for a long time, turning them over in her mind like precious gems. She had never thought about it that way. She had simply followed her heart, the heart that Lily had somehow reached despite every wall she had built around it, and she had made a choice that felt as natural as breathing. But if her choice could help Marcus and Lily and all the other humans who were treated as lesser beings by the galaxy's cruel hierarchy, then perhaps it meant something after all. Perhaps her survival had a purpose beyond simple luck. Perhaps the universe had kept her alive for exactly this reason. The journey to the Medical Research Consortium took 3 weeks, and Kyrvith spent every moment of it preparing herself for the worst. Lily's condition had continued to deteriorate, and some days she was too weak to even open her eyes, and Kyrvith would sit beside her bed and tell stories in a voice so soft it was almost a whisper. She told Lily about her mother, the fierce warrior queen who had taught her to fly and fight. And never surrender, she told Lily about her siblings, the brothers and sisters who had died defending their homeworld against the hunters. She told Lily about the sacred flames that burned in the heart of Pyraxian Prime. Flames that the Drakari believed contained the souls of all their ancestors. When I die, Lily whispered one night, her voice barely audible, do you think I could go there too? Kyrvith felt her heart break and rebuild itself in the span of a single breath. You are not going to die, she replied, and there was steel in her voice. Not today, not tomorrow, not for many years to come. But if I do, then I will carry your flame myself, Kyrvith interrupted, and I will add it to the sacred fire of my ancestors, and you will burn alongside the greatest warriors my people have ever known. Lily smiled, and even through her pain and exhaustion, it was the most beautiful thing Kyrvith had ever seen. Promise? I promise. The treatment was not a cure, the doctors were very clear about that, but it stopped the progression of Lily's condition, and even reversed some of the damage that had already been done. For the first time in years, Lily was able to walk on her own, just a few steps at first. Then more, and her vision began to clear, and color returned to her pale cheeks on the day she was declared stable enough to leave the medical facility. Lily asked Kyrvith to carry her outside. I want to see the stars, she said. With my own eyes, Kyrvith wrapped Lily in a thermal cocoon of dragonfire and flew through the observation dome's open hatch into the void. They floated there together in the darkness, surrounded by infinite points of light, and Lily reached out her small hand as if trying to catch a star between her fingers. Kyr? She said after a long silence. Yes. Little flame? Are you still my dragon? Kyrvith held her closer, feeling the warmth of her small body against her scales, feeling the steady beat of her heart, a heart that would keep beating for years to come, until the last star dies, she replied. And then I will find new ones to light for you. Years later, when historians wrote about the great changes that swept through the galaxy, when they tried to explain how humanity rose from obscurity to become one of the most respected species in the Galactic Cooperative, they pointed to many factors. They talked about human adaptability and creativity. They talked about humanity's strange ability to form bonds with species that should have been their enemies. They talked about the stubborn refusal of humans to accept impossible odds. But those who truly understood what had happened told a different story. They told the story of a mechanic who saw a chained dragon and thought only of his daughter. They told the story of a warrior who found her fire not in battle, but in bedtime stories and paper cranes and terrible jokes. And they told the story of a little girl who looked at a monster and said, "That is so cool." Because in the end, humanity did not conquer the stars. They did something far more impressive. They made the stars worth protecting, and somewhere in the vastness of space, a dragon and her chosen flame flew together through the endless dark, lighting up the void with fire and laughter and love. This was not the end of their story. It was only the beginning. The vacuum of space was cold and silent and absolutely perfect. Kyrvith floated in the darkness between the wandering sparrow and the Vorthakian warships, her body suspended in the endless void, her scales beginning to glow with the fire that had been building inside her for 3 long months. The slavers had captured her broken. They had captured her beaten and drugged and wrapped in chains, a shadow of the warrior she had once been. And they had never seen what she truly looked like. They had never seen a Drakari in her full glory. They were about to learn her. Wings unfurled like the sails of an ancient vessel, stretching wide across the stars until they blocked out entire constellations. And bioluminescent fire raced along their edges in rivers of blue and gold. The chemical suppressants were gone now, burned away by months of healing and hope and a love she had never expected to find. And her fire glands erupted with power that made the void itself seem to tremble. She opened her jaws, and released a roar that no sound could carry, but every being on those 3 warships felt it anyway, a psychic scream that crashed through their minds like a tidal wave, carrying with it 3 years of rage and grief and the burning need for justice. The Vorthakian warlord's face went pale on his command bridge. "Impossible," he whispered. Her powers were suppressed. She should not be able to. He never finished the sentence. Kireth launched herself at the nearest warship like a comet made of fury and flame, and her claws tore through the reinforced hull as if it were nothing more than wet paper alarms, screamed throughout the vessel as she ripped her way through deck after deck, leaving a trail of burning metal and terrified slavers in her wake. They tried to stop her. Of course, soldiers with plasma rifles and shock batons rushed to intercept her, but she moved through them like wind through leaves, her movements too fast for their eyes to follow, her fire too hot for their armor to withstand. She was not fighting like a cornered animal. Anymore, she was not fighting to survive. She was fighting for something far more precious than her own life. She was fighting for a little girl who believed in dragons. The first warship died when Kirith reached its reactor core and unleashed the full power of her flame directly into its containment field. The explosion lit up the void like a newborn star, and she rode the shockwave toward the second ship without even slowing down. This crew was more prepared. They had seen what she had done to their sister vessel, and they were ready with heavy weapons and blast shields and everything their technology could offer. It was not an Akire Rev through their bridge viewport and killed their captain with a single swipe of her claws, then turned her attention to the weapon systems that were still trying to target the wandering sparrow. She ripped out power conduits with her bare hands, melted targeting computers with precise bursts of flame, and shattered the main cannon array by simply flying through it at full speed. The second ship began to drift, dark and powerless, as its surviving crew scrambled for escape pods. 1 warship remained. The Vorthakian warlord's flagship was the largest of the 3, bristling with weapons that could vaporize a small moon, and it was already turning to flee when Kirith caught up to it. She landed on the main engine housing and dug her claws into the metal, and she felt the ship shudder as the crew pushed their engines to maximum power, trying desperately to escape the nightmare that had destroyed their fleet. But Kirith was not going to let them run, not this time. She had run from the hunters who destroyed her world, and she had spent 3 years in chains because of it. She was done running. She was done hiding. She was done being afraid. With a roar that echoed through the ship's hull, she tore the main engine core from its housing and hurled it into the void, watching with grim satisfaction as the massive warship began to spin out of control. Then she flew to the bridge. The Vorthakian warlord was waiting for her with a massive energy blade in his hand, his tusked face twisted with rage and terror. "You think you have won?" he snarled as she crashed through the viewport. "I have connections across the galaxy. I have allies who will hunt you and your precious humans to the ends of the universe." Kirith stalked toward him, her scales glowing with barely contained fire, her golden eyes burning with a light that made him stumble backward. "Then let them come," she replied, her voice echoing with ancient power. "Let every slaver and warlord and monster in the galaxy come. I will burn them all." She grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the deck, and she saw the exact moment when his rage turned to pure, primal fear. But you will not be there to see it. She could have killed him, should have killed him. Perhaps, but something stayed her hand, a small voice in the back of her mind that sounded like Lily asking if she was going to eat Hera. Weathered face with tired eyes, asking her to choose. "I'm going to let you live," she said, dropping him to the deck. "And you are going to spread a message for me." The warlord stared up at her, gasping for breath. "What message?" Kirith leaned down until her face was inches from his. "The Drakari are not extinct," she said. And we have found something worth protecting, something that makes us stronger than we ever were before. She turned and walked toward the shattered viewport. Tell them that the dragon has found her flame. Then she launched herself back into the void, leaving the warlord surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet and the ashes of his pride. The flight back to the Wandering Sparrow took only minutes, but it felt like hours. Her body was battered and bleeding, starlight leaking from a dozen wounds, her wings trembling with exhaustion, but she was smiling. She had not smiled like this in 3 years. Marcus was waiting at the airlock when she arrived, his face pale with worry, and he caught her when she collapsed through the door. "The Drakari have a word," she managed to say as he lowered her gently to the deck. "It is called Kethalar, and it means the fire we carry for those we have chosen to protect until death." She looked toward the corridor that led to Lily's room. "I have found mine." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and then he did something that surprised her completely. He hugged her. It was awkward and uncomfortable, and her scales were too hot, and his arms were too short. But it was also the warmest thing she had felt since the fall of Pyraxian Prime. "Thank you," he whispered. Kivth did not know what to say, so she said nothing. She just let him hold her while her wounds slowly healed and her fire slowly cooled, and her heart slowly accepted what she had known for months. She had found her family, and she would burn the entire galaxy to protect them.